I got some pretty bad news, I'm afraid, this week. The future might not happen. And I got a guy with me who knows about as much about the future as any of us. Ulf Ewaldsson is the CTO of Ericsson, one of the largest tech companies in the world. I think he has about 110,000 people at his company. About 109,000 of those probably report to him. Ulf, welcome to TechCrunch TV.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
So I don't like to depress our audience, Ulf, but you're saying that we're not going to have this super connected future that everyone's been dreaming about, where all the entrepreneurs are building stuff for? What's going on here?
Well, I think so far so good. I mean, the networks have grown to tremendous speeds. We have 4G being rolled out. North America is one of the big markets where 4G is really doing well. More than half of all 4G subscribers in the world are here in North America. At the same time, we have cloud development, we have all the opportunities, and we have businesses whose main strategy is becoming mobile. I don't think there is any business where you're
so far
thinking,
so good. So what's the problem?
Well, the problem is, or the issues might be, that to realize many of these future services, and now I'm going to stretch it a bit, so imagine cars going down a highway in 60 miles an hour, but they're remote controlled.
Well, that's not that hard to imagine with what Google's doing. I mean,
exactly.
That's not the distant future.
But would you agree? I mean, remote controlled cars at that speed, I wouldn't do that on 4G. So my argument is that in all the imagination, in the Hollywood movies where you have wearing goggles with face recognition, immediate when you turn your head and so forth, the networks that we have today are not built to handle that. So there is going to be a lot of discussions between a lot of the innovation power in terms of the internet community, in terms of companies that would like to make mobile into their strategy, and then the network companies who sits on frequency licenses and who has a lot of the assets in the networks, they would have to agree. So that I see as a big opportunity and also a risk.
Well, let me be a bit cheeky here. Ulf. Are you really saying that we all need to buy more Ericsson equipment? Is that the problem, or is it a political problem? Is it a spectrum issue? What's the real issue here?
It's many issues at the same time. I think, Ericsson's role is also very much to advocate and look at possible futures. I mean,
but you're a for-profit company, so you sell the equipment to the carriers.
There are such tremendous opportunity in terms of growth, and I'm talking about growth for both over-the-top players, for innovators, for companies that would like to benefit from this, is making their strategy. I mean, typically the automotive industry or General Electric, healthcare, education, anyone who is exploring this opportunity of being mobile and doing mobile things together with the carriers can unleash a potential, if they could agree on business models and so forth, that I think would benefit the growth of the whole country.
But this is worrying, Ulf, that we're not ready for the future. I mean, perhaps the future may exist, but we just assume it's just going to magically happen. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think, we've come from a period now where I think a lot of visionaries are out talking about the connected society, or what we call the future society of all things connected and so forth.
The Internet of Things.
The Internet of Things, the network society, the 50 billion connected devices in 2020, which we came up with in 2009. I think all of that has created an enormous amount of fantasy and exploration of what could that mean and so forth. Even the Hollywood movies now contain those visions as they are real.
Right.
You would see face recognition, for instance, on people using Google.
The technology exists, it's just the network is the problem now.
We have come to the notion that one of the key issues of this is really the bottleneck is going to be in the networks and the way the networks are being built. And I think that...
But aren't you the guys building the networks?
I mean, we are, but I'm talking about the new technology and stretching it a bit, because my point is that when we're looking at 5G, the next G, why would we need another G? I think that another G would be needed because of these shortcomings to realize the future of the network society. So
but just as there's such a thing as Moore's law, isn't there such a thing as the G law, that after 4 comes 5 and after 5 comes 6, and there's always more demanding technology, so we're always going to need more broadband. Is that fair?
Right. I mean, when we did first G, we didn't know it was a G. So, and then when there was the digitalization, it was the second G. And then third G was based on bringing data into voice-centric networks, basically. And then 4G is very much about all data-centric. I mean, today in all mobile networks in the world, the average traffic of all the traffic in those, the average on data is 80%.
Okay,
so
but
it's totally data-centric.
I'm still not clear on who has to solve this problem? Is it a government issue? Is it a large tech company issue? Is it a consumer issue? How does this thing get solved?
A little bit all of the above, because we agree on the vision, and then there are a number of issues to be solved going forward. One of them is frequencies. We expect there will be 1,000-fold traffic in the next 10 years, because so far traffic in the mobile networks is doubling every year and keep at that consistent pace.
Which is scary.
Yeah, and even if we looked at Q1 this year, we measured the traffic had doubled again from Q1 2012. So that's really happening. It's continue at that pace. It's 1,000-fold more traffic. That means that 1.5 to about 2 gigahertz of spectrum is going to be needed just to make sure that that happens. So I think the spectrum issue is certainly very, very important.
But the spectrum issue differs from country to country. I mean, in America, there's a specific issue over spectrum, which is different in Europe and different in Asia. Is that fair?
Well, not really. I mean, global alignment on spectrum is very important in order to get scale and get the cost down. If we can get scale and get the cost down enough, that means new services will be realized, because that's how the industry works. The scale is one of the biggest driving forces to realize new opportunities when it comes to the smartphones or connected devices and so forth. So that's very important. That means spectrum alignment. My prediction is that spectrum will be more scarce resource on this planet than oil, which is, I think, tremendous in the long run. Now we're talking about 50 years out maybe, but I think so.
So who are the oil sheiks of the future? Because spectrum is owned by government.
Yes.
So it's the governments will get rich selling the spectrum.
Well, even oil is licensed. So I think that, or the drilling rights and so forth. And I think it's going to be the same with the spectrum, that it has to be companies that deserve to drive the licenses because they're taking best care of the spectrum. So that's a very important issue.
TechCrunch doesn't like bad news or too much bad news. So we've had 70% bad news. Give me some good news. You see the future as well as anyone. You're the plumbers of the internet. You're the ones providing all the hardware to enable our mobile society. What's exciting about the future that's pretty much guaranteed? In your mind, what you're seeing at Ericsson, particularly in terms of your initiatives like Network Society?
Well, right. I mean, if you're out here in Silicon Valley or something, one of the big, really good news is that there are so many people out here in the innovative community that are working on solving many of these problems. So I think there is tremendous interest in the mobility as such. I'm meeting a lot of companies that talk about how they want to use the mobile technology to come out to the market in a new way and so forth. So there is a good notion.
And by the way, how is Ericsson working with the startup community? I know that Ericsson is becoming more prominent in the US. Are you investing in startups? Are you partnering with them?
We are. We have an investment program in startups, particularly in long-term technologies, where we are looking at these technologies will be key to solve some of these problems that we're talking about here.
Wow, so you're looking for investments at the moment.
Yeah, we are always doing that. And we can also say, and that we're combining that with our organic growth, of course. And organic growth will always be very, very important for us when it comes to investments in R&D. We invest about $5 billion every year in R&D. So it's a fairly heavy portion of our total turnover that goes into just pure R&D. But paired with that is our strategy to do seed investments in startup companies, in fairly young companies, to find new technologies that we will make use of in the networks in the future.
And in your mind, what's really hot? Automotive, healthcare, education, are those the three big ones? What about energy?
All of those four, I would say, and even more. I think when it comes to, we call these verticals. If you're horizontal, everything is vertical and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I think that these industries would benefit so much from mobile technology. And not only that, I think society as such will benefit so much. We have to remember that the movement that we're on is also a global movement. We've passed 6.4 billion subscriptions in the world.
But of those, how many real people is that? 2, 3?
4.5.
So we're at 4.5 billion. We've got what, 7 billion on the planet.
Yeah.
When are we going to be at 6.5 billion?
In the next 5 years.
And that changes everything.
Yeah, about next 5 years. But the big thing is mobile broadband. If you then look at mobile broadband, because we're in this big change from voice-centric networks into completely data-centric networks. The traffic is already data-centric to a very, very large degree. 4G is just being rolled out now. So when I'm talking about 5G, that's beyond 2020. But if we look at the change that's bringing is really around development, economic development. Because what's different with voice and data is that in voice, the services that were provided was within an operator, so to say. You called me, we talked together on the phone. But in data, you're connecting all the companies, all the industry all the services, both industry and society, you're connecting that to the population, which means that regulatory issues, for instance, and the regulators' roles will change over future. It will become much more of an enabler for economic growth than it is today.
Well, lots to think about, lots to discuss. Ulf Ewaldsson, who is the CTO of Ericsson and a man who sees the future as well as anyone. The future then might exist, but we're all going to have to help Ulf and his team build it. Thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV, and I hope to have you back way before we have 5G.
Thank you, Andrew.